Hey guys, Scott here. We got some more good old behavior data. Today we're going to be looking at some kill rates, perk rates, and all that good stuff. Before I go any further, I do need to read this line by Peanuts that says, "We encourage you to have fun discussing this info. Please try not to draw any conclusions from data alone." Yeah, behavior. Don't draw conclusions from it. I'm not going to go for the obvious joke here. They have been better with that. I feel like they've been a lot more receptive to community feedback lately, but for the vast majority of their life, it's been pretty much only data from what we can see anyway. Anyway, let's go over the old popular perks first. Starting off at the top, Windows of Opportunity. This is a no-brainer. It's the best new player perk in the entire game, and the value that it has doesn't go down that much. Even if you're extremely good at the game and you know every single tile, every palette placement, all that stuff, there's still RNG elements to the game, and also you don't know what your teammates have used. So if you're running to Shack and you think the palette's up and you play it as if the palette's up and you get there and it's not there, well, that's where Windows of Opportunity would have been really useful, because now you'll know it's not there. You'll change your pathing to go, somewhere else. So Windows being top is an absolute no-brainer. Is it overpowered? I don't really think so. It doesn't give you more palettes on the map. It just lets you know where to go. And it seems like maps have been getting more and more killer-sided lately as they keep reworking them. Just going by the recent change to all the farm maps that are way more killer-sided than before. So it seems like as maps get weaker and weaker for Survivor, the usefulness of Windows goes down and down. So that being said, it's still immensely useful right now. So it being at the top is a no-brainer. Adrenaline, again, it's a staple. It's probably never ever going anywhere. Life being so high is kind of crazy to me. I expected Life, Balanced Landing, Sprint Burst, and Dead Hard to be all roughly within the same percent, but Life is almost twice as used as Sprint Burst and Dead Hard, which is kind of crazy to me, because Life is probably my least favorite exhaustion perk, because I think it's the hardest to make use of. With Balanced Landing, as long as you plan a proper chase and you don't just run into wherever and then go, oh, I have nowhere to drop. It's better. Dead Hard, depending on the killer, can be vastly better in my opinion. Sprint Burst is always useful. Light, sometimes, like, you'll be in a chase and you need to vault somewhere, but then vault back, and so you end up wasting half your life vaulting back, or you end up lifing into a corner or something because the tile is not situated in a good way. I don't know. It's definitely my least favorite exhaustion perk. That's not to imply it's not good, because it's very good, but it's definitely my least favorite of all of them. So the fact that it's so much higher than the others is kind of crazy to me. Resilience being 17%, which is kind of weird to me. Like, I've never thought Resilience was that good. Like, the faster vaulting is super nice, but this is probably for more of a demographic that doesn't even know it does that. They probably just see yellow bar when injured on generator, think good. And the fact that it's 17% in games is kind of crazy to me. I don't think it's that good. Like, it's all right, but it's not that good. Deja Vu being 5th. Again, this is more of a lower MMR and to mid MMR kind of category here. That being said, it's still useful for everybody. Again, like, sometimes you get like a Larry's or, a Midwich, where even if you're very good at the game, generator placements are random most of the time. And so being able to know where they are is still very, very useful. It's good at preventing 3-gens if the killer is at least not trying to do it themselves. So it's still useful. It's just not... What is going on? Dude, I shaved and I have such a Giga Chad chin right now. Holy shit. So it's still decently useful, yeah, but I don't know. I don't think it's that useful. Self-care being 15%. This has to be attributed to mostly Asian areas, because what I understand, it's really, really common in the eastern parts of the world. I don't know why. I don't know what's different about their style of gameplay there, but it's much more common there, and it's common to new players, so that's probably why it's up so high. I pretty much never see self-care in any of my games. I could play 20 games in a day and see maybe 1 or 2 self-cares, so it's very, very rare for me, but I acknowledge that there are other cultures and regions that have different play styles and stuff, so it's more use there. I still think the perk's terrible no matter where you play, but it is what it is. Then we got Sprint Burst and Dead Hard. Yeah, those are probably never leaving this top 10 ever. Bond, very useful in solo queue, very useful pretty much. It's one of those perks where you don't like seek it out to put it on, but when you have it, you're like, oh, this is really nice. It's always useful to have. To me, it's like agitation for killer. You don't really like ever aim to put it on unless you have a basement build or a skirt trick build, but when you do have it, you're like, oh, this is nice. I can make that hook. I wasn't going to make it before. So to me, Bond is like one of those kinds of perks. And then we have Kindred, which is the ultimate solo queue perk. No further explanation needed there. It makes solo queue much more bearable because everyone can see where everybody is. We can see who's going for hook saves, things like that. So very useful. Now for killer. It's no surprise that the entire left side is just slowdown perks, because DBD, let's face it, is based around using slowdown perks. It's not based around running 4 slowdowns or anything like that, but it is based around running a slowdown or 2. Even if you're very good at killer, if you're playing, Wraith with just 4 aura rating perks or something like that, it's very hard to win unless you play in a super sweaty way. And even if you do play in a sweaty way without slowdowns, sometimes you don't have enough time to even do that. So Dead by Daylight, without a doubt, is balanced around having slowdowns. It's just not balanced around stacking 4 of them and finding that line to where it's not grueling going against 4, but it's unfair when you have 0. You can't expect the player base to regulate themselves and go, I'm going to run just Grim Embrace on my Billy, or I'm going to run Grim Embrace and Pop on my Wraith or something. Like, you can't expect them to, they're just going to slap on everything so the games go on longer. That's just how it's going to work. So Pop is obviously amazing. Pain Res is very good. Sloppy Butcher for hit and run killers is excellent slowdown. Surge is not as good in my opinion, but it's still good. Like, especially my problem with Surge is it's too map dependent. If you're on the game or, Dead Dog or Wrecker's Yard or one of these small maps or multi-floor maps, it is insanely strong. But then if you get, like a Rotten Fields or something, it's not good at all. You'll get maybe 8% regression on 1 gen every time you get it down. It's just not that good. So I don't like how map dependent it is. That's why I don't use that perk. If it was more of a consistent thing, like, the most regressed 3 generators regress by even less percent, by like 6% or something, I would still prefer that over this current version that's too map dependent in my opinion. Corrupt Intervention is a staple. It is useful on every killer in the entire game. Say the Best for Last is only this high right now because this data was taken from December to January, and this is going to be right before it was actually nerfed, or right during that nerf. So I'm willing to bet this is going to go down a lot the next time we see some data, probably at about 4 or 5%, based on what I've seen playing the game so far. So that's going to go down a ton. Barbecue and Chili, again, even without the blood points anymore, knowing where to start your next chase immediately, always useful. I love Barbecue. Every time I have a perk slot available, I will always slap that on. Noed, again, that's going to be there since the dawn of time, since 2016, one of the most used perks in the game. It can swing a loss into a win very, very quickly, and expecting survivors to find all 5 totems and break it before the match ends is unrealistic at best. So it's still very, very, very strong. Lethal Pursuer, again, is one of those feel-good perks, kind of like Barbecue and Chili, where it lets you know where to go as soon as the match starts. It's sort of equivalent to Corrupt Intervention, in my opinion. In my opinion, Corrupt Intervention and Lethal Pursuer are both information perks. Corrupt Intervention gives you information by forcing survivors into a much smaller area that you can control, and Lethal just straight up shows you them. So this is going to be stronger at game delay, but this is more precise, and they basically accomplish the same thing. And then we have Bamboozle, which is on half the killers in the game, is just extremely good. Billy, Leatherface, it just can straight up lead to downs. So I hate Bamboozle. I think it rots your brain. It makes killers unable to play certain tiles. They just forget how to play the game. So I don't want to suffer from that, but I can't deny its usefulness. Now, the most popular killers. Important thing to know is that whenever there's a new killer, they are always at the top of this list almost every time. So the most recent killer to come out when the data is out will always be at the top. So you pretty much just ignore that entirely. So Chucky, obviously, going to be at the top. Huntress is always near the top. Wraith is always near the top. Legion is always near the top. Wesker went down a little bit, but he's still near the top. Trapper being so high, the reason Trapper is so high is just because of new players. That's it. He's one of the default killers you have. People try the game for 2 seconds. They count because they're in any MMR, which is, being included here. They play a game of Trapper. They're like, wow, this game sucks, and they stop playing. So those kinds of things are counted, which is why Trapper is so high. Sort of the same thing with Myers as well. And Nurse, again, all in that same category of killers you just sort of get. I guess Myers is part of the DLC, but still, that's more along the lines of what I'm thinking. And then we finally get Blight, who is, I feel like he was higher before, but I'm surprised. And then Ghostface is going to be number 10. These are not super surprising to me. I'm trying to think what killers I figure would be higher. I guess Spirit's going to be lower ever since they nerfed her. Xenomorph being low is pretty surprising because he's one of the strongest killers in the game to me. Plague being only 2% is also surprising because she is also one of the strongest killers in the game. Pyramid Head, also one of the strongest. Even Demogorgon. I guess less people probably own Demogorgon, but still, that's not really an excuse anymore because now you can get Demogorgon. Skull Merchant being higher than all of these killers is a crime against humanity. And Singularity being 1%, I mean, that's an absolute no-brainer. He is extremely difficult to play. Billy being only 2%, this is going to be outdated. This is going to shoot up a ton, probably to even the top 10. So I wish we had this data from, January to February rather than December to January, because we had a whole bunch of changes happen recently. So I'm curious to see how those things change up. Deadliest killers. Okay. So before I even look at number one, I can already see your stupid fucking weave. I was going to say, before I even go to number one, I know it's Skull Merchant because, yeah, it's obviously Skull Merchant because no one wants to play against Skull Merchant. Whenever you see a Skull Merchant, everyone just kills themselves on hook immediately. I'm willing to bet if you found the highest rate of Kobeing off the hook and put it next to a killer, Skull Merchant would by far, by an order of magnitude, have the highest Kobe rate out of any killer because everyone is trying to kill themselves on hook. No one wants to go against this piece of shit killer, and it's very obvious. That's why her kill rate is so high. It's not because she's so incredible, although she is actually decently strong. It's just nobody wants to play against her. So that's what I mean. You can't really take too much of this into account for determining the killer's strength. This does paint a picture of what the outcome of a match is. Skull Merchants are usually getting 4Ks, and that's because no one wants to play against her and they're all killing themselves. So that's what that means. Sadako is high because of just noob stomping. Low to mid MMR makes up a majority of the player base. Majority of the player base has no idea what to do with tapes. They have no idea how to counter condemn. To the average, higher skill player, Sadako is whatever. It's pretty easy to deal with. Not a big deal at all. But for newer players, like, I don't know what's going on, and they just die. So that makes sense as to why she's so high. Pinhead, again, these are all, when you look at all MMR, like I wish we had this for high MMR. Because all MMR, you're basically just going to get all the noob stompers, all the killers that have confusing mechanics, like the whole dream world. Survivors don't even know how to deal with that. The whole box mechanic, people don't know how to deal with that. Survivors have no idea how to remain injured and not panic when they're new to the game. We don't know how to get our bear traps off. Like, these are all killers that have mechanics in the game that are slightly more complicated than I throw hatchet, I place trap, I use chainsaw. So as soon as you have that, new players just, their heads explode and they just die immediately. So that's why all these killers are up here. Interestingly, Spirit is on this list, which does not fit that criteria because Spirit is decently hard to play. New killers actually have a lot of trouble playing Spirit, so it's not something you can just slap on and know how to play and get results with. So that's kind of surprising, but everything else sort of makes sense here. These are mostly either noob stompers or killers with mechanics that are slightly more complicated than the base game and thus newer to mid players. Don't really know how to deal with that. So that just tells us nothing about killer strength whatsoever. Who's the lowest? Doctor, that's strange. Hillbilly's kill rate is going to go up a shit ton too, even using this data, which is sort of misleading in a sense. Hillbilly is going to go up to 65%. I would not be surprised at all. Other than that, everything else pretty much tracks. Yeah. Everyone being above 50% is not surprising at all. Killers are killing more often than survivors are escaping. That's been a known fact for years and years, despite what everyone keeps trying to tell themselves. In terms of the actual results of the match, the game is killer-sided overall. That's a loaded statement because there's a lot of variables to what I just said there. But in terms of what happens at the end of the match, when MMR is determined via just kills and just deaths and stuff like that, then the game is statistically and objectively killer-sided. It doesn't mean it feels like it is when you're playing the match. I'm just saying, according to the data and statistically, it is killer-sided by a decent amount, which is what they wanted. They aim for a 60% kill rate. So now survival rates, this is going to be, this is good. It includes high MMR as well. So this is going to show like solo queue, 2-man, 3-man, and then 4-man survive with friends. Solo queue being the weakest thing in the game. That's not surprising. That's been known for a really long time too. The overall hierarchy, in my opinion, is solo queue, and then 2-man, and then killer and 3-man kind of being equivalent, and then 4-man survive with friends having the edge against killer. That's sort of how it's been for a long time for your standard match of DBD. So that makes a lot of sense. Interestingly, high MMR solo queue is even lower than low MMR solo queue or all MMR solo queue. It's not by enough to really draw a conclusion. It's by less than 1%. So I'm not even gonna make a call off that. That's just data white noise. For 2, it's basically equal. For 3, it starts leaning towards high MMR a little bit. And then for 4 survivors, we have a pretty noticeable jump in survival rates. But even then, it's still killer-sided. This is why every time people, want to nerf Survive with Friends as a whole, that's not the way to fix this. The problem is not the Survive with Friends. It's the good players playing together without a weak link group. That's the issue. It's not the fact that people are playing with their friends. It's the fact that if you're playing solo queue and you happen to get 3 other good teammates, that's way more terrifying than your standard 4-man survive with friends. Just playing with your friends and just being able to talk to them doesn't suddenly make you good at the game. It doesn't suddenly make you know how to go against certain killers. It doesn't suddenly make Nurse and Blight and Wesker and all these killers suddenly bad or anything like that. You can be the best player in the world, but sometimes you're in a really shit spot and you're still going to go down. That's just sort of how the game works. So the fact that even the tippy top high MMR 4-man survive with friends still has a lower survival rate than the killer's kill rate against them, it's not surprising to me whatsoever, because most people that are playing with their friends are just playing with their friends because they want to play with their friends, not because they have an advantage or because they want an advantage. They just like playing games with their friends. It doesn't make them better or stronger at the game. It just makes them able to play with their friends. Additionally, because solo queue now has the UI indicators, the bridge between survive with friends and solo queue has been bridged by quite a bit, mitigating a lot of the upsides of survive with friends. So the balance between these two, it's going to keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. But it's still going to lean slightly killer. And yeah, that is not really unexpected at all. That is pretty much exactly what I thought we'd see here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I wish we had more data, because like, I would love to see like how many hooks people are getting per match. Because like, you know, if you get a 2K and there's 6 hooks, it's like, I wonder what happened there, right? You know, you've got some pretty, I would love to see when the hooks happen, like how many kills are getting, you know, no ed at the end of the match. Are no people dead at endgame, and then we're having a bunch of people die trying to save their teammates at endgame, things like that. Those are all things that are useful for determining the strength of killers and the weaknesses of certain maps. And I think that's useful information as well, and that's something they should be looking at. I would really love to see map kill rates again. That, I think, is probably more important than everything on this list, because you're going to see some massive variances depending on what map that you're currently on. So yeah, that's the kind of thing I'd love to see. This data is cool, but it's not super useful for making balancing changes to the game. It's more useful for just going, oh, hey, that's interesting. And for saying that, yeah, clearly 4-man survive with friends is not as strong as some people think, because they're still dying more than killers are killing them. But it is, you know, obviously stronger than than solo queue, because they're surviving 10% more of the time. So that's still useful information, but I want to see more in-depth stuff. Map, like, you know, game progression, how many kills are, you know, happening at what stages of the game, at how many hook states, at how many generators done are these things happening. I want to see more in-depth stuff like that. I think that would actually be useful for determining balance. Other than that, though, this is just a cool thing to look at. But like Peanut said, not much conclusions to be drawn from it other than that.